The boy insisted his father dig up his mother's grave, and after opening the coffin, everyone.
Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
A few more days wouldn't have hurt. A deep, hoarse male voice came from behind. The lawyer said it should be wrapped up within 48 hours. No one's filing any lawsuits, John's father, Mr. Alan Smith, replied coldly, as if they were discussing a land transfer. Next to John stood his grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, her face wrinkled, hands trembling as she clutched a white handkerchief. She kept wiping her tears, but not once did she bend down to say a word to John. The boy felt completely disconnected from the funeral of his own mother, Clara Adams, the gentle woman who used to walk with him around the lake every Sunday morning, who would patiently listen to him talk about his strange dreams, and who once said, "I will never leave you, John." But now, his mother had left. Suddenly. Without goodbye. Without a hug. Without even one final look. "Dad, where's Mom? Why didn't they open the casket?" John asked with a trembling voice after the burial, as everyone was beginning to walk away. "Shut up. Don't ask nonsense. Your mother is dead. Truly dead. You have to learn to accept it." Alan shouted, causing people nearby to turn their heads. His face was pale, eyes bloodshot. Clearly, he hadn't slept in days. But why couldn't I see her? "Just once, Dad," John's voice cracked. "No means no. The accident disfigured the body. No one should see that, especially not a child," he snapped, emphasizing each word. John lowered his head, his small hands clenched tightly together. Inside, his mother's death didn't feel anything like what his father described. Something was off. Everything had happened too fast, too coldly, and too strangely. That night, back at the family mansion on the outskirts of Tucson, John quietly slipped into his mother's room. The room still carried a faint scent of jasmine. Her nightgown was still draped over the chair. The little piano they used to play together sat quietly, its lid closed, a thin layer of dust covering the black and white keys. John climbed onto the bed, curled up in his mother's old blanket. He didn't cry. Just trembled from the cold. And then, in the still darkness, the dream began. In the dream, John saw his mother lying on a cold floor. Her arms were tied, her mouth taped shut, and her eyes wide open, as if she were trying to scream. A whisper echoed in his head. "John. I'm not dead. I'm still alive. Don't believe them." He jolted awake, forehead soaked in sweat. In the faint light from the hallway, John crept out of his room. He saw his father Alan standing in the kitchen, talking on the phone. No one suspects anything yet. The funeral is over. Everything's tight. "Don't call this number again," Alan whispered tensely. John held his breath, stepped back, his heart pounding. That wasn't how a grieving husband should sound. He didn't understand everything, but fear was rising in his chest. The next day at school, John could barely focus. During art class, he took red and black crayons and started drawing furiously on paper. When his teacher, Ms. Mary Johnson, came by, she gasped at the drawing, a woman tied up, blood pouring from her mouth and eyes, surrounded by dark hands restraining her. "John! What are you drawing?" she exclaimed. "It's my mom, from my dream," John mumbled. Ms. Mary immediately brought him to the school office and called his father to report the incident. The next day, John was taken to the psychology office at St. Michael's Clinic. The doctor, Matthew Wilson, a middle-aged man with thick glasses, began asking a series of questions. "You dreamed your mother was taken? Have you been feeling angry or confused lately?" "No, it's not a dream. I know my mom is still alive. She told me." "She's being held somewhere," John insisted. Dr. Wilson later spoke privately with Alan after the session. John was diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress response, with potential mild delusions. He was to be closely monitored and shielded from negative stimuli. I recommend limiting his exposure to images or items related to the deceased mother. Medication may be considered if symptoms persist, the doctor said. Alan nodded without hesitation. Do whatever's necessary. I don't want him going insane. That night, the dream came again. Even clearer. This time, Clara whispered. Someone pretended to be me. That body, it's not me. John, you have to save me. He sat up suddenly and rushed to the living room. He rummaged through the old photo box. In one family picture, he stared at his mother's face, her eyes, the small mole under her right ear, the faint scar on her neck. The next morning, John ran into the kitchen. Dad! The person in the grave isn't Mom. Mom had a mole under her right ear. The woman at the funeral didn't. Alan slammed his coffee cup onto the floor. Shut up. What do you want from me? You want me to go insane too? Mrs. Eleanor, his grandmother, rushed in, alarmed. Alan, calm down. He's just a child. No. He's ruining everything. I'm so sick of all this madness. Alan roared and stormed off. Eleanor turned to John and gently embraced him. John, sweetheart. Sometimes adults do things for your own good. You shouldn't torment yourself. No, you don't understand. Mom is still alive. I know it. John pulled away, tears streaming down his face. In the corner of the living room, near a crooked wedding photo, there was a small surveillance camera hidden in the bookshelf. John had never noticed it before. He was beginning to feel that the house was no longer safe. His father's eyes always dodged his. Doors were always locked. Phone calls late at night. And deep down, John's dreams were no longer nightmares. They were cries for help. John, did you draw those pictures again today? Ms. Mary's voice rang out in the school counseling room, her expression filled with concern. I'm not blaming you, but can you tell me why you keep drawing people with taped mouths and bleeding eyes? John looked down at the floor. He didn't know how to answer anymore. Everything he said was dismissed as crazy. It's my mom, she told me. She's still alive, being held somewhere. I see her in my dreams every night, ma'am. Ms. Mary sighed and looked at the school psychologist, Mr. Stephen Johnson, who was quickly jotting notes in a folder. Recurring dreams, he said thoughtfully. This isn't just a post-traumatic reaction anymore. It could be a sign of complex PTSD. We don't know what to do with him anymore. Alan suddenly stood up. I've taken him to private psychologists, and nothing changes. All he does is draw bloody stuff and babble about fake corpses in the coffin. Do any of you understand what it's like to lose your wife and also deal with a son going insane? Stephen kept his tone calm. We're only trying to help, Mr. Smith. But if John continues to exhibit these symptoms, we may need to consider more intensive treatment. Medication or inpatient care at a psychological recovery center. No. I'm not sending him to a mental hospital. Alan growled, then turned to John, his face red with anger. You hear me? No more talking about those damn dreams. John clutched the hem of his shirt. His heart was racing. He wasn't crazy. His mom wasn't dead. He was sure of it. That night, during dinner, John quietly pushed his beef aside. Why aren't you eating? Alan stared. I'm not hungry, John mumbled. Not hungry? Are you going on a hunger strike to get attention now? He slammed his spoon onto the table. Mrs. Eleanor tried to intervene. Alan, stop. He just lost his mother. Don't push too hard. Don't defend him. You've spoiled him his whole life and now look at this mess. John bit his lip. Mom hated grilled beef. She always made chicken for me. Alan laughed bitterly, a cold, sharp laugh. Well, where is your mother now to cook it, huh? She's buried deep underground, John. Stop bringing her up, I forbid it. The following week, John was referred to a young psychiatrist named Alexander Thompson, part of the child psychology department at General Mercy Hospital. Alexander was in his 30s, with brown hair, bright eyes, and a gentle voice very different from the other doctors John had seen. You can tell me anything you remember about your mom, John. No one here will judge you, Alexander said softly. John hesitated, then started to talk. Fragments of memories. Whispers in dreams. Visions of Clara tied up, gagged, her eyes wide with terror. Alexander nodded, taking careful notes. Very interesting. You remember with great detail. What do you feel in those dreams, John? It's not fear, it's worry. Mom is crying for help. She needs me. I can't turn my back, John said. Alexander frowned. You know, many people who go through major trauma tend to create their own world to escape reality. I'm not escaping. I see her, so clearly, John insisted. That evening, Alexander took the initiative to call Ms. Mary. His voice was pensive. I have a strange feeling about this boy. Normally, kids with PTSD try to avoid their memories. But John, he immerses himself in them, as if he's actually receiving signals from somewhere. What do you mean? Mary asked softly. Maybe it's just intuition, but I think we should recheck all the records about Clara Adams's accident. Alan is very guarded, but there are too many odd details. The next day, in the school library, John pulled his classmate Daniel Harris aside to a quiet corner. Daniel, can you help me find satellite images of I-10 from the day of the accident? What? Why would you need something like that? Daniel asked, surprised. I think something's wrong. My mom isn't dead. I have to find proof. Daniel scratched his head. Are you sure you're okay? You don't believe me either. John said, disappointed. It's not that, it's just, you're scaring people. They say you need a doctor. John snapped, I'm not crazy. My mom's alive, and I'm going to prove it. The following week, John snuck into his mom's room again while his father was out. While rummaging through drawers, he found a small wooden box hidden behind a wedding photo. Inside were a handkerchief embroidered with the initial CT, a few old pieces of jewelry, and a set of scribbled drawings. At the center was an image of a woman with her eyes sewn shut, her hands reaching out as if pleading. John froze. This was exactly the same image he had drawn subconsciously. But his mother had drawn it, before him. A chill ran down his spine. He stuffed the paper into his pocket and rushed out of the room only to be stopped by Alan in the hallway. What were you doing in there? I missed Mom. Liar. What were you digging through? He snapped, yanking John by the sleeve. Don't touch me. John screamed, breaking free and running to his room, slamming the door. In the dark, John pressed his ear to the door, listening to his father's heavy footsteps fading away. Then came the sound of a key turning. His father had locked his mother's room from the outside. For the first time, John felt truly afraid. Not of the dreams but of the real, flesh and blood man living under the same roof. One afternoon during study group, John started drawing again. A white building with many barred windows. On the roof, the silhouette of a woman raising her hand in a silence gesture. Below, shadows of children staring up. Ms. Mary looked at the drawing and gently asked, "Is this the place where you dream your mother is being held?" John nodded. "It looks like a lab," she said quietly. "Yes. There's white light, beeping machines, tubes in Mom's arms." Ms. Mary stiffened slightly. "John, maybe you should tell all this to Dr. Alexander." John looked straight into her eyes. "No one believes me. But Mom is reaching out. She's not giving up and neither am I." On a freezing December morning, while most people had begun to forget the sudden death of Clara, one person couldn't stay silent: Dr. Lucy Wilson, Clara's close friend and longtime colleague in the medical field. Lucy sat quietly in her office at Wilson Medical Center, eyes fixed on her computer screen. She had called the health department 3 times that week to request a copy of Clara's autopsy report. And each time the answer was the same: no record found. Impossible, Lucy muttered. No autopsy. A fatal car crash without forensics. She called an old friend, forensic investigator Dr. Thomas Clark. Thomas, do you remember the accident in Tucson about a month ago? A woman named Clara Adams. Hold on, let me check, Thomas replied, typing quickly into the system. A few minutes later, he said, there's nothing on record. Her name doesn't show up in any autopsy logs. Lucy furrowed her brow. So, there was no post-mortem. Maybe the body was identified by the family and they declined an autopsy. But there's no signed confirmation. No forensic report, no investigation, only a death certificate signed by Leonard Carter. Thomas paused for a second. Leonard? He's a close friend of Clara's husband, Alan. Exactly. That's why I'm worried. Something here stinks. That evening, Lucy went through Clara's old files. In an old folder, she found the name of Horizon Research Center where both Clara and Leonard had worked together. A handwritten note read, Project S421 absolutely not approved. Signs of patient exploitation. Lucy exhaled. Clara, what did you find? And why did you die so suddenly? She picked up her phone and tried calling someone else: Luke Taylor, a technician who had once worked at Horizon. The call rang 3 times, then cut off. She called again. No answer. Then a strange anonymous text arrived. You're digging into things that should stay buried. Stop now. Lucy froze. She sank into her chair, heart pounding. Who knew she was investigating? Who had access to her private messages? The next morning, Lucy went to meet Inspector Andrew Phillips, the officer in charge of the Tucson district. I'm sorry, Dr. Wilson, Andrew said, frowning as he glanced over the documents she brought. But what you're saying is all speculative. There's no concrete evidence. The death has been certified, the paperwork is complete. The casket was buried. But there was no autopsy. No physical report. And the death certificate wasn't signed by a coroner, but by Leonard, someone with financial ties to Alan. We can't reopen a case based on suspicions between friends. You should let it go. Lucy slammed her hand on the table. No. Clara was my friend. She didn't just die for no reason. And if that body wasn't hers, then a crime is being covered up. Andrew remained silent for a moment. Finally, he sighed. I'll log your statement. But unless there's something more concrete, I can't do anything further. A few days later, an accident occurred. Around 3 a.m., a loud explosion shook the apartment complex where Lucy lived. Her third-floor unit was engulfed in flames within minutes. News outlets reported it as a gas leak. Unusually strong blast. No signs of external tampering, said a local news broadcast. But those who knew Lucy were skeptical. She was always cautious. Her stove was maintained monthly. She didn't smoke. From the charred wreckage, a burned body was found, later identified via DNA as Lucy Wilson. The incident was officially declared an accident. News of Lucy's death quickly reached General Mercy Hospital. Dr. Alexander, who was overseeing John's case, heard about it while having lunch. No way, she just called me the other day, Alexander murmured, holding the newspaper, stunned. Ms. Mary, who also knew Lucy, placed a hand on his shoulder. What did she say in the call? She said something was deeply wrong about Clara's accident. She said she was being followed. And that if anything happened to her, we had to keep investigating Horizon Research. She thought this was a silencing. Absolutely, Alexander replied coldly. But we need to be very careful. They won't hesitate to eliminate people if necessary. That night, John sat in his room with the folder his mother had left behind. He looked at a photo of Clara and Lucy both in white lab coats, holding documents, smiling brightly. On the back of the photo, a handwritten note read, "Best friend. The only one who knows the truth." He whispered, "Now Miss Lucy is gone too. Mom, they're killing everyone one by one." In his restless sleep, Clara appeared again. She whispered, her eyes wet with tears. "John, trust no one, not even the man you call father. You must find Dr. Evans, hurry." The next morning, John rushed to Ms. Mary's office. "Miss. My mom talked to me again last night." Ms. Mary gently replied, "Slow down, sweetheart. Tell me what she said." "She told me I have to find Dr. Evans. He's her friend from the old research center. She said he's the one who knows the truth." Mary blinked. "Evans, that name does sound familiar. I think Lucy mentioned it once. I have to find him. But my dad hid all the files. I'm not allowed in Mom's room anymore. He locks the door every night and won't let me go out." "Do you know Dr. Evans's full name?" John shook his head. "I'll try to look him up for you. But you must not let your father know you're searching, understand?" John nodded firmly. "I understand." That afternoon, in his office, Alexander received a strange package with no return address. Inside was a USB drive, a black and white photo of a laboratory, and a single slip of paper that read, "If you still care about Clara Adams, check the USB. And stay silent." Alexander plugged the USB into his personal computer. There was only one file, record_421.mkv. In the video, hidden camera footage appeared. Clara, wearing a white lab coat, was arguing fiercely with Leonard in a conference room. "I won't be your accomplice anymore, Leonard. Those women are not lab rats. Clara, you don't understand everything. We're on the brink of a medical breakthrough. No. You're exploiting other people's lives. If you keep dragging my name into this project, I'll report you." The video stopped. Alexander's hands dropped. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He looked out the window, pitch black outside, the wind whistling through the gaps. Clara had dared to speak up. And now, she was missing. He whispered to himself, "No. I can't stay silent." Since the accidental death of Dr. Lucy Wilson, the atmosphere inside the Smith mansion had become more tense than ever. Alan had turned cold and silent, like a stone statue. He forbade John from entering any room other than his own and the kitchen. "You're not allowed in your mother's room. And don't even think about going down to the basement. From now on, I'm changing every lock," he snapped one evening after catching John sneaking open his late mother's bedroom door. "But that's Mom's room. She wouldn't want me banned from it." John protested. "What do you know? I don't want to hear another word." Alan roared, eyes bloodshot. Grandma Eleanor witnessed the whole scene, but could only pull John into her arms and whisper, "Don't fight your father right now, sweetheart, he's grieving in his own way." John didn't answer. Deep down, he knew his father wasn't grieving. He was hiding something. A week later, Alan went on a 2-day business trip to Chicago. It was a rare opportunity. The moment he left the house, John waited until nightfall, then quietly slipped into his mother's bedroom, the room secured with a digital lock whose code he had watched his father enter multiple times. He tried the familiar digits, 0923, his mother's birthday. Beep. The door opened. John let out a sigh of relief and stepped inside. The dim hallway light spilled into the dusty room. Everything was exactly as it had been the day she disappeared. the bed neatly made, the piano still holding a sheet of unfinished music, and the glossy wooden jewelry box sitting on the vanity. John opened the box for the first time since her death. Inside were a silver bracelet, his mother's wedding ring, and a small slit at the bottom of the box that could be easily missed unless one looked carefully. He slipped his finger into the slit and pressed lightly. A hidden tray popped out. Inside was a piece of paper folded in thirds, stained with dried blood. John's heart pounded. He unfolded it. The handwriting was messy but clear. "If anything happens to me, find Dr. Evans. He knows the truth." John nearly dropped the paper. He whispered, "Evans. Evans." He ran to the balcony, where the Wi-Fi signal was stronger, and searched online. After a few minutes, he found information about Dr. Mark Evans, formerly head of biological research at the Horizon Institute, where his mother had worked. But the doctor's name had been scrubbed from all official websites months ago. No address. No phone number. No trace. John returned to his mother's room and kept looking. In the bottom drawer of the desk, buried beneath a pile of messy papers, he found a folder labeled S421, Internal Documents. Before he could open it, bang! The front door burst open. Alan was home. Panic shot through John. He stuffed the blood-stained note into his pocket, hid the folder inside a pillow, and crawled under the bed. Alan entered, furious. He scanned the room suspiciously. "John," he called loudly. John held his breath. Alan walked to the window, looked around. Then, he shut the bedroom door, locked it, and left. 10 minutes later, when the footsteps had faded, John crawled out from under the bed. He grabbed the folder, ran back to his room, locked the door, and began reading. The next morning, John arrived at school with vacant eyes. He ran into Ms. Mary in the hallway. "Miss. I found something," John whispered, pulling out the blood-stained paper. Ms. Mary read the line. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God. This is your mother's handwriting?" "I think so. And this Dr. Evans, he's important. She said he knows the truth. I'll help look him up. But you must be careful. Don't let your father know. He's locking everything now. I think he's hiding something awful." Ms. Mary placed a hand on John's shoulder. "You're doing very well. But you must be extremely careful, understand?" John nodded. But deep down, the fear wouldn't leave him. He felt like he was stepping into a deadly game, one where the loser disappeared, just like his mom. At the same time, across town, Dr. Alexander was meeting with Daniel Marin, an investigative journalist who used to work with the New York Times. "You used to report on private medical institutions accused of illegal tissue grafting, right?" Alexander asked. "Yes. But most of those stories got buried. The paper was under heavy pressure. Once, I almost got hit by a car, still don't know if it was an accident or not." Daniel smirked. "Have you ever heard of a project called S421? Daniel froze. "Yes. But very little is known. Supposedly tied to the Horizon Institute. A project that got shut down for unknown reasons." Alexander handed him the photo and USB he had received the day before. Daniel watched the video of Clara and Leonard, then sat in silence for a long time. She was brave. But going up against Leonard Carter, that's like signing your own death warrant. Alexander sighed. "I've been following a boy, Clara's son. He's investigating his mother's death, not knowing who he's really up against. We need to help that kid. I know someone who used to be a technical manager at the Tucson Research Center. He might know where Evans is." Alexander nodded. "Contact him now. We're running out of time." That night, John heard a thud in the basement. He held his breath and pressed his ear to the floor vent. A strange man's voice echoed faintly but clearly, "Everything's fine. No one suspects a thing." The kid's just a lunatic. But if he finds out more, deal with him. John shivered. He wasn't imagining it. That voice wasn't his father's. There was a stranger in the house. On Monday morning, Class 6A at Desert View School was thrown into chaos like never before. During language arts, John suddenly jumped out of his seat and screamed. "My mom isn't dead. You buried the wrong person." All the students fell silent. Ms. Mary turned pale, dropped her red pen, and rushed to his side. "John, calm down. You're in class. What are you saying?" "My mom is trapped. The person in the grave isn't her," he shouted, eyes wild, clawing at his arms until they bled. A girl screamed, "He's bleeding. There's blood." Ms. Mary hugged him tightly, trying to restrain him. "John, stop. Don't hurt yourself. I have to make the adults believe. My mom is still alive," he sobbed uncontrollably. After the incident, the school immediately summoned John's father and grandmother, Eleanor, for an emergency meeting with the counseling department. Inside the principal's office, tension hung thick. "What the hell is wrong with my kid?" Alan slammed his hand on the table. "I told the school not to bring up the dead again." "Mr. Smith," Ms. Mary replied calmly, "we didn't do anything. But John is showing signs of deep trauma. He truly believes his mother is still alive." "Eleanor, say something." Alan turned to his mother. Eleanor was silent. Her old face was wet with tears. I'm starting to think something's not right, Alan. This child isn't lying." "No. You can't trust a delusional child." Alan snapped. Alexander, who had been invited as John's attending physician, spoke slowly. "I don't think this is delusion. There are multiple signs pointing to real memory fragments. And the boy gave us a handwritten note worth taking seriously." Alan stood up. "What note? Who gave you permission to hold my wife's belongings?" Ms. Mary cut him off. "We didn't keep anything. John showed it to me. But it said we should find someone named Evans." At that name, Alan froze for several seconds. "Eleanor," he stammered. You think we should open the grave?" The old woman nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "He's my grandson, Alan. He's suffering. If exhuming the grave is the only way to end this, then so be it." Alan slammed his hand on the table and stormed out. 3 days later, public opinion stirred after the Tucson Daily Star published an article about an elementary school boy crying for help, claiming that the body in his mother's grave was a fake. The article included a recording of John's outburst during class. "My mom isn't dead. Crazy boy or buried truth?" The headline became a hot topic online. At the same time, the Carter family's attorney, Martha Carter, received a formal request from Eleanor and Alexander to file a petition for the exhumation of Clara Adams's body. "I'll prepare the paperwork. But Alan will definitely oppose it," Martha said when she met Alexander. "He has no right to stop this if it's necessary to protect a child's mental health," Alexander replied. At an emergency meeting with the police and forensic representatives, a heated debate broke out. Detective Andrew Phillips placed a file on the table. "There is no clear evidence that the body in the grave is incorrect. If this is just the emotional reaction of a child, it does not constitute legal grounds." Martha countered, "What about the handwritten note from the deceased? The lack of forensic verification? And the fact that the person who signed the death certificate was the victim's husband's close friend? We need consent from the primary guardian," a forensic officer interjected. "Eleanor is the direct grandmother. And Dr. Alexander is the attending psychologist. If they both agree, that's a strong enough reason," Martha stated firmly. After several hours of debate, District Attorney Carol Lee spoke up. "I authorized the exhumation for the purpose of verifying the identity of the remains, to put an end to the controversy and protect the mental well-being of the minor. When John heard the news, he remained silent for a moment, then said, "I'm going with you." "No," Alexander objected. "Exhumation is a heavy experience not suitable for children. I have to go. I need to be sure. If that person isn't my mom, I won't stay silent anymore." Alexander looked at John, eyes filled with determination. Finally, he nodded. "All right. But you'll stay outside." Early on the day of the exhumation, South Lawn Cemetery was shrouded in thick fog. The police sealed off the area, and the forensic assessment team had arrived the night before. The media was barred from the site, though some reporters lingered from afar. John, wearing a thick coat, stood close to his grandmother, eyes fixed on the grave being carefully dug up. His father, Alan, stood a few meters away, stone-faced, silent. Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Henry Brooks coordinated the procedure. "Dig slowly. Don't damage the coffin." A sharp clang rang out. The shovel had hit the wooden lid. "We're there." Everyone held their breath. Two hazmat-suited personnel carefully unlatched the locks. Dr. Brooks leaned down and gently opened the coffin lid. The creak echoed in the eerie silence of the cemetery. A foul stench wafted up, even though the body had been chemically treated. And then silence fell. The woman inside the coffin was not Clara. Her face was disfigured by skin-tightening surgery that made it look like rubber. Her nose protruded unnaturally, eyes wide open, lips sewn shut with surgical thread. Her left arm showed an unhealed incision with stitches still intact. Brooks quickly brought over his tools. "There are signs of post-mortem cosmetic surgery. Some of the tissue implants don't match the body's proportions." "Can you determine her identity?" D.A. Lee asked. "We'll need DNA samples. But I can say this with certainty: this is not Clara Adams." Alan turned pale. He staggered back, trembling, then suddenly turned away. John whispered, "I told you, my mom isn't dead." "There's no way, this isn't Clara," Dr. Henry Brooks murmured as he examined the corpse under a flashlight. A protruding nose, square jaw, partial amputation of the left ear, none of it matches Clara Adams's biological profile. And the eyes, D.A. Carol Lee stood behind him, whispering, wide open, as if she was drugged before death. "It's possible," Brooks nodded. "And there's something else. Look here." He gently turned the corpse's left arm, revealing a long surgical incision from elbow to wrist, blue stitches still crusted with dried blood. "She was operated on after death?" Mary asked, face pale. "No. The opposite. Blood vessel traces indicate she was still alive when her arm was cut open for tissue harvesting." "Oh my God," Eleanor clasped her hands, mumbling a prayer. Alan stood still, ghost-white, speechless. John remained fixed on the body, his lips pressed tight. "I told you," he mumbled. "The person in that grave wasn't my mom." Hours later, the body was transferred to the forensic center. Brooks and his team began immediate analysis. In Autopsy Room 4, Dr. Clara Roberts, an experienced forensic pathologist specializing in special cases, worked alongside Brooks. "When I examined under her right eyelid, I found evidence of an extremely refined surgical procedure, a layer of skin grafted from different tissue. This technique has been used in disguise surgeries," Roberts said. "So someone altered her to look like another person." Brooks sighed. "Not just that. The cheekbones were shaved down. The nose was raised using medical-grade silicone. But it was rushed. The quality doesn't meet surgical standards," she continued. Brooks looked at his colleague. "So it's highly likely this corpse was made to resemble Clara?" "Yes. But there's something even more terrifying." Roberts opened a CT scan folder. "The abdominal area shows signs of organ removal. It's likely some of the organs were taken." Brooks dropped his pen. "Illegal organ harvesting." Back at the mansion, Alan sat alone in his study, head in his hands. He had never expected the truth to surface so quickly. Thump. Thump. Footsteps. He looked up. John stood there, holding the bloodstained note his mother left behind. "You knew all along, didn't you?" "Get out!" Alan shouted. "You signed off on burying someone else. Mom's not dead. You buried a nameless woman to hide something, didn't you?" Alan leapt to his feet and slammed the desk. "I said get out." "No!" John yelled. "I'm not leaving until you tell me the truth. Where is my mom?" Eleanor rushed in, trying to stop them. "Stop! Are you two trying to turn this house into hell?" "Not hell, a slaughterhouse," John whispered, eyes locked on his father. Alan staggered back into his chair. "You don't understand. I was forced." "By who?" Eleanor asked, tears filling her eyes. Alan said nothing. He sat in silence, hands trembling, clenched tight. That evening, during a meeting with D.A. Lee, Dr. Alexander presented the initial forensic findings. DNA confirms, the body in the coffin does not match Clara Adams. "And the physical features don't match either?" Lee asked. "Not at all. There's clear evidence of surgical alteration to deceive basic identification." "Could we classify this as corpse falsification?" Attorney Martha Carter interjected. "It's more than that. This is evidence of a criminal operation involving illegal tissue grafting, murder to swap bodies, and forged legal records." Lee nodded. "Then I'll be filing charges." Alan Smith signed all the paperwork. "But I don't believe he acted alone," Alexander emphasized. "What about Leonard Carter?" Mary asked. "Wasn't he the one who signed the death certificate?" "And also the head of Horizon Institute, where Clara worked," Alexander nodded. "I'm digging deeper into his involvement." Lee flipped her notebook. "We need to interrogate Alan. And search all financial records of Horizon Institute." The next morning, Detective Andrew Phillips and a team of officers knocked on the door of the Smith mansion. Alan opened it, face pale as a sheet. "Mr. Smith, you are being summoned for investigation regarding suspected falsification of a death certificate, complicity in murder, and concealment of a body." John stood in the kitchen, silently watching as his father was handcuffed and led away. He said nothing. But his eyes were red. Meanwhile, at the forensic lab, Dr. Clara Roberts began cross-referencing fingerprints with records of women reported missing over the past year. Then, an unexpected result appeared. The fingerprints matched Lily Parker, a homeless woman who had been admitted to a psychiatric hospital a few months earlier and then vanished. Brooks sank into his chair. "Oh God! They kidnapped an unknown woman, murdered her, and surgically transformed her to look like Clara." "Not just that," Roberts continued, "there could be many more victims. We've only seen the tip of the iceberg." The police car transporting Alan Smith arrived at the Tucson Regional Police Department just after 8 a.m. His face was gaunt, eyes lifeless. But to Inspector Andrew Phillips, his silence was nothing more than a thin layer of mud covering a boiling cesspool. In the interrogation room, Attorney Martha Carter, District Attorney Carol Lee, and Dr. Alexander were present. John wasn't allowed inside, but he sat in the hallway, gripping his mother's old silver bracelet tightly in both hands. Carol began, "Mr. Smith, you are being investigated on the following charges: falsifying a death certificate, complicity in a body swap, involvement in illegal tissue grafting, and concealing a missing person." Alan swallowed hard, avoiding eye contact. I wasn't the mastermind," he finally said. "I was forced." "Who forced you?" Carol interrupted coldly. Alan lowered his head. "Leonard. Leonard Carter. He knew I was having an affair. And I owed his institute over $200,000. He threatened to expose everything, to sue me, ruin my life, if I didn't cooperate." Martha frowned slightly. "And Clara?" Do you know what happened to her? Alan trembled. Clara once told me she discovered Horizon Institute was harvesting tissue from unidentified women. She planned to report it. I begged her to stay quiet. But Clara was stubborn. And a week later, she vanished. Alexander clenched his fists. And you didn't call the police? Didn't question the institute? Didn't do anything? I was scared. I knew Leonard wasn't someone to take lightly. Lee gritted her teeth. So you let him fake a body, rush a funeral, and silence everyone through your cowardice? Alan hung his head. I didn't think he'd actually go through with it. I thought it was just a threat. Carol stood up. We'll be filing for an arrest warrant for Leonard Carter. As for you, you are not to leave the city. Meanwhile, in Madrid, Horizon Institute still operated normally as a modern private medical center. But behind its cold white walls and silent corridors, a sophisticated criminal system had quietly existed for years. Dr. Leonard Carter, founder and director, was a 53-year-old man with an intellectual and polished appearance. He frequently appeared on television, giving lectures on breakthroughs in biological tissue grafting. That morning, as he entered his glass-walled office on the 9th floor, he was startled to see Carl, the former technical manager of the Tucson Research Center, waiting for him. Carl. What are you doing here? Leonard frowned. I need answers, Leonard, Carl replied. Where is Clara Adams? Leonard smirked. I don't know what you're talking about. Cut the act. I was in charge of the basement camera systems. I know about the areas that weren't on the blueprint. I know Clara was taken down there, and no one ever saw her come back. Watch your mouth, Leonard snapped. You were paid well to keep quiet. And I'll return every penny if it means saving Clara's life, Carl replied firmly. Leonard laughed coldly. That's noble. But unfortunately, you won't get the chance. He pressed a button under his desk. 2 security guards appeared and grabbed Carl's arms. Remove him. And make sure the surveillance footage from that week is erased, Leonard said quietly. At the same time, Alexander and investigative journalist Daniel Marin were at the New York Times headquarters. Daniel was preparing to publish a major article, The Truth Behind Horizon Institute, where biology became a weapon of crime. The article goes live at 7 a.m. tomorrow. We need to move before Leonard runs, Daniel said. The police need hard evidence, Alexander replied. Do you still have the video of Clara arguing with him? I do. And Carl just sent me another clip. They opened the file. In the blurry footage, Clara was being dragged by 2 people in lab coats through a basement hallway. She's saying something, Alexander murmured. A voice screamed, Leonard. You won't get away with this. The screen went black. Alexander stood up. I'll take this video to the DA. We're close to exposing him. Daniel shook his head. We're not there yet. Leonard has ties to powerful corporations. Without public pressure, he'll buy his way out. Then I'll put John on national TV, Alexander said. That child is the one person who can change everything. That night, at the Smith residence, John sat with Eleanor in the kitchen as a special report aired on TV. Body swap scandal, illegal tissue grafting, and a missing woman who may still be alive. The explosive story shaking Horizon Institute. John turned to his grandmother. Grandma, if Mom is still alive, where is she? Eleanor couldn't speak. I'm afraid they'll kill her. Like they killed Dr. Lucy. No, we'll find her, she whispered, though she didn't believe it herself. Upstairs, footsteps echoed. Alan, recently released on bail after interrogation, said nothing. He merely paced back and forth in his room. John looked up at the stairs and clutched his mother's note tighter. Mom, wherever you are. I'll find you. They can't kill your spirit. At the forensic center, Dr. Brooks received DNA results from 3 other misidentified bodies. All 3 were women without clear identities, aged between 25 and 40, and had no known family. "We're dealing with a systematic killing operation," Roberts said. "And Clara might still be the one loose thread." Brooks nodded, whispering, "If Clara's alive, she's the only one who can pull down the curtain." Since the special report aired on national television, the U.S. public was in an uproar. On social media, Clara Adams's name trended with hundreds of thousands of shares and the hashtags Save Clara Horizon Truth. Under mounting media pressure and a court order, police expanded their investigation. Inspector Andrew Phillips and the technical team began reviewing all properties previously owned by Horizon Institute over the past 10 years. "Focus on abandoned farms, old warehouses, any site that could have been used for illegal confinement," Andrew ordered. Less than 24 hours later, a critical lead emerged. The New York Times legal team uncovered a covert lease agreement between Horizon Institute and an abandoned farm roughly 90 kilometers from Tucson, listed as a non-hazardous biological storage facility. Daniel Marin immediately contacted Alexander and Carol Lee. "They may have hidden Clara there," Daniel said urgently. "We're running out of time." A convoy of police vehicles quietly headed toward the rural outskirts of Oro Valley, where the targeted farm was located. John rode in a separate car with Alexander, gripping his mother's old silver bracelet tightly. "You're sure you want to come?" Alexander asked one last time. "Yes. Mom's been waiting for me. I have to be there." John nodded. By the time they arrived, dusk had fallen. The entire area was eerily silent and cold. Police raised their weapons and split into 3 teams to surround the site. One team headed straight to the main house, the others checked auxiliary buildings. "Check every door. There could be basements, tech rooms, or storage chambers," Andrew commanded. Alexander and Daniel followed closely behind the forensic team. Meanwhile, John held his grandmother's hand outside the perimeter. "There's a hatch here," a police officer shouted. Everyone rushed over. Beneath a pile of rotted boards was a large metal door with a triple-layer electronic lock. "We'll have to break it," Andrew said. "Get tech support here immediately." Daniel turned to John. "Do you remember your dream? Anything about a code?" John closed his eyes. A memory flashed, Clara whispering, "The day we first met. The code is 0712. The day Mom gave birth to me." Andrew looked at the boy, then entered the code, 0712. Beep. Click. The door opened. A mix of antiseptic and mildew filled the air. Down the stairs was a narrow hallway lit by flickering fluorescent lights. "Move in." The police team led the way. Alexander and Andrew followed close behind. The hallway led to a sealed steel room. A fingerprint scanner and blinking red screen were installed on the door. A technician intervened quickly. After a few minutes, the door clicked open. Inside, white light revealed a medical bed. A woman lay motionless, thin and pale, a portion of her head shaved, for lines still attached to her arms. "It's her!" Alexander shouted. "Clara! Doctor, we have a pulse." "She's alive," a nurse confirmed. John brushed his grandmother's hand aside and dashed through the barricade. Daniel rushed to stop him. "John, wait. Let them finish the check first." "No. That's my mom." In less than 10 minutes, Clara was brought up from the basement on a stretcher. Electrodes and a ventilator were attached to her pale face, but although her eyes were closed, there was still a visible reflex. John stepped closer, kneeling beside her. "Mom," his voice trembled. "Can you hear me?" A single tear rolled from the corner of Clara's eye. Alexander's voice cracked, "She's responding. She's not fully conscious, but brain activity is present." John took his mother's hand and bowed his head. "I knew you never left me. I believed in you. I waited for you every night. 3 days later, at Tucson General Hospital, in the intensive care unit. Clara slowly opened her eyes. The room was bright white, softly lit, filled with the familiar scent of antiseptic. She turned her head and saw a small figure asleep at the edge of the bed. John. Her voice was barely a whisper. The boy jolted awake, his eyes welling with emotion as he burst into tears. Mom! It's really you. You're awake. Clara cried too, tears streaming down her cheeks, her voice hoarse. I knew, you wouldn't leave me. I knew it. Alexander stood nearby, silently watching the mother and son embrace in tears. He turned to Carol and Daniel and said softly. No news report could ever capture this. Daniel nodded. This isn't a case anymore. This is a miracle. Carol stepped in gently. Clara, I'm Prosecutor Lee. You've come back. And we won't let anyone harm you again. Clara looked at her and whispered, Leonard, there are more people in the basement, cold storage, notebooks, find them. Alexander gently held her hand. We will. But first, you need to recover. Clara turned back to John. You saved me. The boy nodded, tears streaming down his face. You told me in a dream. I was just listening to you. 3 days after the rescue, when Clara had regained partial strength, the police and prosecutors launched a surprise raid on Horizon Institute, under the direct supervision of Inspector Andrew Phillips and legal oversight of Carol Lee. The basement doors were opened. What the team discovered made the investigators shudder. A freezer room holding 3 unidentified female bodies wrapped in medical plastic, all showing signs of surgery. Handwritten notebooks listing dozens of biological samples, each with a photo, height, and identifying characteristics. Surveillance footage of internal meetings in which Leonard gave lectures about an unethical but necessary model for the future of medicine. All of it was indisputable evidence. On the 9th floor, in the executive office, Leonard Carter was on a call when the door burst open. 4 officers stormed in. National Police. Leonard Carter, you are under arrest for orchestrating murder, body substitution, illegal tissue grafting, and the abduction of citizen Clara Adams. You have no right. Leonard shouted, struggling. I'm a scientist. I save lives. Andrew slammed him against the desk. Cold handcuffs clamped around his wrists. You'll have plenty of time to explain that in court. Images of Leonard being led out of the building were broadcast live. In her hospital room, Clara watched the news report, tears streaming down her face. At last, we did it, she whispered. John held her hand, eyes glowing. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Alexander entered with a document envelope. Clara, I have news. Leonard has been arrested. And even better, 3 women were found alive in the anesthesia chamber. One of them just regained consciousness this morning. She said you helped keep them alive by sharing your 4 fluids. Clara gave a faint smile. I prayed that at least someone would survive. Alexander rested a hand on her shoulder. You're the reason this all came to an end. That afternoon, during a national press conference, Prosecutor Carol Lee made an official statement. This is the largest illegal tissue grafting case in U.S. history. Horizon Institute will be permanently shut down. All assets will be seized, and the entire medical staff involved will be investigated. Most importantly, we honor the courage of Clara Adams, a survivor who exposed the truth. Hundreds of journalists rose to a standing ovation. Meanwhile, a video of John's emotional speech at school about his dream and the moment he embraced his mother in the hospital went viral on social media. The public began calling him the boy who awakened justice. A nationwide fundraising campaign titled A Bracelet for Clara was launched, offering financial and emotional support to all the victims. 1 week later, at the preliminary hearing, Leonard sat slumped in the defendant's box. He no longer held the arrogant confidence he once displayed, just a frail man in a gray prison uniform. Prosecutor Lee presented internal footage, corpse photographs, and printed medical records. The defense attempted to argue medical contribution, but the claim was swiftly dismantled. When Clara was called to testify, the courtroom fell silent. She walked slowly, still weak and supported by Alexander. But her eyes were steady and unshaken. Mr. Leonard said I was an ethical obstacle. But ethics are not an obstacle, they are the foundation of medicine. The people who died under his hands were not statistics. They were human beings. And I am here today to say, I'm not afraid of him anymore. The panel of judges declared. Defendant Leonard Carter is sentenced to 30 years in prison, without parole. The entire courtroom stood and applauded. Outside the courthouse, John threw his arms around his mother, tears streaming. You won, Mom. You're free. Clara stroked his hair. No, you won, John. You were the one who never stopped believing in me. A few days later, in Tucson's Central Park, a small event was held by patients once treated at Horizon, now survivors. Clara stood among them, still weak but radiant. John held her hand as they stepped onto the platform. We are not victims, Clara said. We are proof that truth always finds its way. And that, a child can do what an entire system once overlooked, trust his heart. In the crowd, Alexander, Daniel, Carol, Mary, and Eleanor, all who had helped, clapped through tears. As the event ended, a young reporter asked John, do you have anything to say to others facing injustice? John smiled, his eyes filled with wisdom beyond his years. Don't stop believing in your dreams. Sometimes, dreams are the truth. That night, in the old Smith family home, now a sanctuary for just the two of them, Clara sat at the piano for the first time in over a year. The unfinished melody she once played with her son was continued. John sat beside her, striking the opening notes. Clara turned to him and smiled. Do you remember the tune? He nodded. You taught me, Mom. How could I forget? The music filled the room, pure, gentle, like the very dream they once shared. A dream that had come true, not by magic, but through love, faith, and courage. The story of John and Clara leaves us with a profound lesson about the power of belief and love. Even when the whole world dismissed him as delusional, John never gave up on his dream, never stopped searching for his mother in the depths of despair. His courage and steadfast heart awakened justice and exposed hidden evil. The greatest lesson is this: never stay silent in the face of injustice, and never underestimate a child's intuition, for sometimes, the truth hides in dreams.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.